All right, we are here. We've had a day to sit with the debacle in Philadelphia. I tried to think the flop in Philadelphia. Let's call it that, even though it was. I don't think I would call that game a
Or
flop,
just the
but
Philly fumble might be the most
that
accurate.
wow, you should do this for a living. That's
Yeah.
actually dynamite. Yeah, the Philly fumble is what this game will go down as. The Philly faux fumbles, like Wendy's faux for faux. Maybe they should cut up some type of deal with the Vikings for fumbling all the time. I did think it was funny, and I let's just kick right off. I'm Jordan Hawthorne. He's Will Goodwin. Follow him on Twitter at Will Bad Lose, and check out the Bad Loser blog. Let's jump right in here. The narrative that we pushed on this show was if you want to win, you have to play clean football. And the Vikings did the exact opposite of that. The narrative pushed by other shows, personalities on Twitter, Joe Schmo from, the Speedway down the street talking to you while you buy your coffee. Everybody was saying, come on, they're not going to fumble the ball that many times like they did against Tampa Bay. And they one-upped Tampa Bay. They had, 3 turnovers in the Tampa Bay game. They go +1, so the Los Angeles Chargers are, expecting 5 turnovers from the Vikings next week if this trend continues. I think that's the takeaway from this game. And tell me if this is a hot take, and then I'll shut my mouth and catch my breath. The Vikings win that game if they turn the ball over 3 times instead of 4. The Vikings win that game going away if they don't turn the ball over at all.
So I think the second one is definitely true. Um, Now it's very hard to sit here and conjecture about what would have happened because obviously each event leads to the next, and so having the idea that, well, of course they would have won if they just wouldn't have fumbled is it's very simplistic to think that way. But it's almost like not debatable. Even if Justin Jefferson doesn't fumble, and as Kirk Cousins put it, if he would have made a perfect throw, Jefferson just scores standing up, and you don't even have to think about the whole fumble over the pylon thing. Um, or if Jefferson just goes out of bounds at the 2 yard line, you're not even worst case scenario there. You're probably getting three. You're probably getting a touchdown, and so you're the whole swing of that game is completely different. Um, if they maybe would have reduced one of their turnovers, maybe the game ends up being different. Depends on which turnover it was. I think if it's the Jefferson turnover and you have that one back, I think the Vikings do win the game. You have the momentum, you have the lead, and all of that. And the big thing that I think, I mean, maybe one more final thought just on the what if scenarios. I think the Vikings are 2-0 if they simply turn over the ball, 4 times over the last 2 games instead of 7.
Yeah.
Like I honestly think, whether it was the Cousins strip sack, that led to a field goal against the Bucks, or it was the Cousins interception at the goal line, those were massive point swings because of the immediate nature of what would have happened and what did happen. Um, Philadelphia is same sort of thing. That Jefferson fumble over the pylon was the killer, of course. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's a very strange place to be where you're looking at a team that's 0-2 and very easily could be 2-0 if you simply fall to the ground without dropping the ball a few times. It's
Yeah.
it's a very wild place to be in.
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to. I let's quickly do this. Let's do this take because every show that's talking about the Vikings game today is doing this take. Do you hate the fumble over the pylon rule? Because I don't. I actually,
Absolutely.
you do hate it.
I hate it. I
Everyone
under
hates it. Go
yeah.
ahead. You give your case.
I was just going to say, like, I understand it because there has to be a line in the sand somewhere. Um because, just say you're running for the end zone, ball gets poked out at the 1 yard line, and it goes through the back of the end zone, like by the field goal post. There's got to be some level of penalty for that. It can't just be, I mean, what are you going to do? Put the ball at the 1 yard line?
Right.
And so I understand the logic where, like, if you're reaching for the pylon and you drop it over the pylon and it ends up, I understand why it's like, well, it's technically through the back of the end zone, so technically it's the same thing. I understand that, but at the same time I hate it because, and not only just because it hurt the Vikings last night.
Yeah.
It's something that I've never liked in football because it has this penalty effect of someone trying to make a play, and if you dropped that ball, diving for the pylon 1 yard previous, it's the Vikings ball at the 1 yard line. So that's where I have a really hard time with kind of the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. I totally understand why there's a letter of the law there, but the way in which it sort of has to be interpreted it's strangely punitive for someone who's trying to make a play, trying to score the ball. And that, Eagles fans would maybe push back on but that ball was not forced out. That was Jefferson simply just dropping it. That was not because a defender made a great play on the ball. That was because Jefferson just dropped the ball when he was reaching for the pylon. So it's a strangely punitive thing for someone who is trying to make a game-changing play, and then they're penalized very badly for it, and you end up losing the ball and losing points, and in this case, giving away a few points too.
Yeah. So my 2 cents for it's probably worth less than that, but I am very football purist. I guess, guy, and the only time I think I've supported a rule being changed is like the overtime rule, specifically the field goal overtime rule that they changed after the Saints Vikings game in '09. And I remember getting into football and being like, a field goal? That's all it takes to win an overtime game? Like, it seems like, you call it sudden death, and that kind of feels like going out on a whimper almost.
Yep.
But like when the Bills lost to the Chiefs, I wasn't supportive of both teams get a chance to touch the ball in overtime. I didn't like that. I still don't like that. And with this, it's it's the way the game was designed to be played. If you fumble the ball out of the end zone, it's a touchback, and it's been that way for all of history of football, and that's part of the game. And you don't have to love every part of the game. I don't love that LeBron James sits out so many games in the NBA, but I guess they're trying to legislate that as well. You can't always have what you want. I'm sure that the NFL will take a look at it and review it. But I just think that Jefferson now has to kind of, I think I said this a lot last week. Live to fight another down, my friend, because you can go out of bounds there, not try to make the touchdown play. You're still going to have 90 yards in the first half. Maybe I'm not saying he was doing that to boost his stat line. That's not, obviously if he has a good stat line, the Vikings are winning.
He's just trying to score.
Yeah, he's just trying to score, but you can just go out at the one. You give yourself 3 chances. The way that game was feeling, probably foul chances at getting in the end zone, and instead Philly ends up going and getting 3. That's a 10-point swing. Vikings lose by 6. Vikings could have won by 4, but you shoot yourself in the foot. That's kind of what you get. So now that we've done that discussion, do you have any? Have we said our piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the turnovers, I mean, the last thing I'll say on this maybe, and then this probably maybe bleeds into the rest of the discussion, is that, it's easy to sort of sit here the day after, or even, the night of, and you're watching this sort of debacle unfold. Even as the Vikings are coming back and making a game of it, it never really felt in doubt.
Yeah.
There was a moment there where I think the Vikings defense had a 3rd down where if they would have got off the field, like I saw Cousins and Jefferson go grab their helmets.
I remember this.
And then it would have, and then I think they gave up that explosive run to Swift, and that sort of, ended the game. It never really felt in doubt. So it's hard to really have, a ton of credence to the idea of like, well, if they just wouldn't have fumbled, they would have won. Anyway,
Well,
there's
I think the
an
point of it
infinite
is
amount of
the point
permutations
of
of
it
how that
is
game could have ended.
those two those two turnovers in that game that I think are like really detrimental because all turnovers are not created the same, just plain and simple. I mean, the the fumble, like I'm trying to think of a specific one, but I think the fumble that Brandon Powell had after the punt was was bad because you had it down in the red zone. That's
Yep.
probably points if you don't turn the
Yep.
ball over, and then it turned
Absolutely.
into a field goal for Philadelphia. And then also the Jefferson one is honestly to me just the killer. That's the one that you look at and you'll look back on this season. If the Vikings miss the playoffs by a game, we will look back to Philadelphia and that fumble and say, well, that was our chance to get one, and we
Yep.
didn't, capitalize on it. The positive spin, which I feel like I typically do all of the negative and then all of the positive, and I want to start trying to chop it up a little bit so that way I don't, like have to go on a negative rant for 25 minutes. The positive is the Vikings have shot themselves in the foot so bad in these first two games, and they've lost by a combined 9 points, which is something Kevin O'Connell pointed out in his press conference. Back to being negative. KJ Osborne, what are we doing? What are we doing with KJ Osborne here? And I'm not even saying it's all KJ's fault. I'm not blaming KJ for dropping the ball and doing that kind of stuff. But why is KJ like? It feels like he's like the second option on so many plays, and he just shouldn't be. I just don't think he should be. I don't think he should be the second receiver option personally, but you have the highest paid tight end in the NFL on your team, and he had a good game last night. 7 catches for 66 yards, but like there were just some situations where we were going to KJ, and I didn't think we needed to be going to KJ. And I'll talk more about this later when we talk about this kind of mini buy that the Vikings are on now, and what the coaching staff needs to address and the front office needs to do, and yada yada. I think KJ. I wrote down last night as I was laying in bed, and I was in my feelings a little bit. I wrote down that KJ is like a 70 overall Madden receiver because everyone knows I'm a Madden GM and a Madden play caller. He's like the 70 overall that you just want to be good because you drafted him and you want him to, get the superstar development and do all this stuff. So you just false feed him the ball, and it's like he's just not that guy. I just don't think he's that guy. And I know you've said he's maybe your favorite Viking. I still love KJ. I still want KJ to be an important part of this team, but I think there's someone sitting underneath him in the depth chart that's a little undersized, which is probably why he's not wide receiver 2 because they don't trust him to run block. But
yeah,
at some point, I think that the explosivity outweighs the run blocking, and I don't know. I don't know. What was your takeaway from KJ? Do you feel any differently about him today?
It's a really good topic, and I think if you remove just the Osborne slander and the dunking on him because he had 2 drops, and the interception in week 1 was at least partly his fault, whatever. If you kind of remove sort of the emotion from it, the objectivity is everything you're saying is right on. The Vikings have not, I haven't seen the snap counts. I didn't look at the snap counts yet from the game last night, but I don't know if Addison or Osborne was on the field more, but it's very clear that the Vikings like Osborne's ability to block. And you can't blame him. I mean, he's built like a fullback. It seems every offseason he comes back stronger physically. So his ability to support the run game is very, very valuable. I'm seeing now Osborne played 97% of the snaps, and Addison only played 69% of the snaps. So there you go. Something that is going to be interesting moving forward, and something that I'm sure the coaching staff will chew on in this sort of mini buy in this weekend, that they will have to look at the tape, kind of go back to the playbook, see what should be kept, what should be ditched, all those things, what should be added and adjusted. There is a world in which Jordan Addison being on the field actually helps the running game. Um, and it's not because he's a good run blocker. um, at this point in his career, with his strength and his stature, he's not a good run blocker. And I think it's probably going to remain that way probably for most of the year. I don't think Justin Jefferson was a very good blocker his rookie year either. Um, Now it's gotten to the point where he's obviously you're not going to take him off the field, but also he is a very serviceable blocker. Had some very key blocks last year on some Delvin Cook runs, etc. So the reason why I think Addison being on the field could actually eventually help the running game is because it makes the defense account for another threat. You have to potentially think about where you're putting your safeties and where you're shifting some linebacker help and where you're shading your extra defensive backs. If it's Osborne on the field, you can get away with one-on-one and be totally fine with it. If it's Addison, you have to take into account the fact that he can just run by the guy that's guarding him. And so even if it's a run play, maybe you don't have Addison block. Maybe you just have him run and you maybe clear out part of that side of the field. You let him run sort of a 10-yard dummy route and block downfield. And so I don't know. I think there's merit to that. And so, that's sort of where I think we all have to be with this. And I'm sure the coaching staff is going to have to take a hard look at this. And Wes Phillips even made a comment earlier this week that Addison's role will grow or it will expand or something to that effect. And so I would expect over the next few weeks, those numbers between Addison and Osborne, the snap counts to sort of the difference between the two to shrink. And at some point, I'm sure Addison will probably see the field more. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't negate the fact that I am a big fan of KJ Osborne. I think he's a great, asset to the team for his leadership, his blocking, his ability to occasionally have a big game. But like you said, to your point, the last thing I'll say on this is you have TJ Hawkinson, and there's really no reason for KJ Osborne being a primary route on any sort of route tree. He should be third or fourth option, and that should be fine. So that's a lot, but that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think
Yeah.
it's not so much that, oh my gosh, KJ dropped the ball twice, cut him. It's just the fact that the other two guys, Addison and Hawkinson, just give you more and could still, change the dynamic of the run game, which is a huge problem right now, even if they're not as good of a blocker as Osborne is.
Yeah, so I have a couple of notes here that I want to throw in kind of rapid fire, just like I promise it won't take long. I don't think in my lifetime I've seen a kicker miss a 60-plus yard field goal against the Vikings. I'm still
Honestly,
waiting. It is the weird. I told Delaney last night, my wonderful, beautiful wife.
every time.
So the first field goal that was like 51 or whatever, the one that Elliott missed, I was like, me and my family have a saying: every time a kicker lines up to kick, we say, this guy never misses. I don't think I've ever seen him miss one, and it's like a joke. We're trying to jinx him, that whole thing. And I looked at Delaney and I said, I don't think I've seen a Vikings opponent kicker miss a kick against us in like a decade plus. So who knows? Like the Ravens in 2009 missed a game-winning kick against us.
I remember
and we were
that.
able to win. Yeah, so do I. I also remember that fondly. And that's the last time it happened. Well, I guess last night now. But so another 60-plus yard field goal against us. I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer. I'm just pointing out, like, come on, man.
I do remember. I don't remember. I think it was 60-plus. It was the double doink from Will Lutz in London last year.
Oh,
I think that was a 60-plus yarder.
That's true. That's true. You see, that's the thing about these kinds of like Debbie Downer stats, like where it's like, oh, they never miss kicks. You don't remember when they miss kicks. You remember when you get walked off.
Absolutely.
You don't remember when, the guy misses the kick. Now, sometimes you do if it has, like the Lutz kick of the Ravens missing in 2009 because it was at like the end of the game. But you don't remember a guy missing a kick in the second quarter of Week 7, 2017. I don't. I don't remember any of the games from 2017 except for Philly and New Orleans. But
Mm-hmm.
other quick talking point I want to bring up, and this one actually might go a little bit longer. The time of possession last night was embarrassing.
Oof.
And 2 game sample, so maybe don't panic, but I think big panic. The Bucks second half said we are going to march down the field, 9-minute drive. Bam. Vikings offense got 3 possessions in the second half. That's not good. Philly's offense in like the second quarter said we're going to march right down the field. Bam. 15. My camera froze up. Bam. 15-yard run. 15 running plays on a drive. A 15-play drive and 14 of them were runs, whatever the case was. Just absolutely chewed the clock. It felt like every time they touched the ball, we weren't seeing it for at least 7 minutes. And that's an unacceptable way to play football. This is another, I'm going to kind of wombo combo these notes. I don't see a mean streak in this defense. And that's concerning. I see a lot of guys trying to make plays, but I see last night, and this is a specific play that's coming to my mind now, someone had Dallas Goedert wrapped up, like 3 yards short of a first down. Harrison Smith comes up, and he stands there, and he watches as the guy pulls him down. And I'm like, Harrison, he is carrying the ball like this, trying to fight out of a tackle. Go punch it. Go punch the ball that he's throwing around like a loaf of bread. Punch it out, get a turnover, we can win the game. Like, I'm screaming at my TV, someone do something aggressive and nasty, and just it didn't feel like there was any. Granted, your guy Jordan Hicks, who I thought had a pretty solid game last night at moments, Jordan Hicks had a couple of tackles on Jalen Hurts where he was putting his head in the turf, the Kentucky bluegrass. Me and Delaney looked up what the field was made of last night after because there was those chunks of Kentucky bluegrass in Jalen Hurts' helmet last night. And I loved it because I think that once Jalen Hurts becomes a runner, plant him. It's not dirty. Yeah. He's a running back. Plant him. He just also happens to throw the ball, so if you can affect his throwing ability by hitting him as a running back, that's a win-win for your defense. So it just felt like there wasn't much of a mean streak. Obviously, excuse me, it's easy to say that whenever you get ran on for 250 plus, those multiple 8+ minute possessions that Philly had. Time of possession is just terrible. I made a statement before the season about how this Vikings offense could be the greatest Vikings offense of all time, just on paper with the weapons they had and everything. Not if you're only going to get 8 possessions in a game or 7 possessions in a game. It just felt like the Vikings can't get the ball back in those spots. So I kind of want to pass it over to you because I kind of flipped the sides of the ball there. What was your takeaway from the defense last night?
Yeah, I just want to top that or jump on that a little bit too. For numbers' sake, the time of possession was basically 40-20 for those who haven't looked at the stats, which is just tremendous. Tremendous that the Vikings had a, somewhat reasonable chance to win the game at the end there. They had the ball half as long. But the Eagles, to your point, they had scoring drives of 5 minutes, 8 minutes. They had a non-scoring drive of 9 minutes. That was the wild one that Al Michaels was marveling over, how they had 9 plays, 15 plays, 44 yards in 9 minutes, and they punted. That was almost as effective as any of the scoring drives, just because they ate 9 minutes off the clock. It was wild. I think your point about the mean streak or the lack thereof, I think is very interesting. I hadn't thought about it in that light. I think it's very true. I sort of jokingly love Jordan Hicks because I know the entire Vikings fan base does not like him. But I don't think it's anything because of what he does, as a man. It's more just his, he was slow last year, and I think everybody piled on him. I will say nobody looked good on the Vikings defense last year, so maybe we should throw that season out as an outlier.
I think that's fair.
Hicks was good last night. Now the run defense as a whole was not, and I think there's a couple reasons for that. But I did really like, I made a note of it that, Hicks was sort of dominating Jalen Hurts. It was a weird sort of like one-on-one domination of like, there were probably three scrambles where Hicks like tried to shake, or Hurts tried to shake Hicks, and Hicks just kind of stood there. And one of them, Hurts just laid down, and Hicks kind of looked at him and frowned and shrugged his arms and walked away.
It was so
Like, what
funny.
are you doing? But apart from sort of like the aggression that I've seen from Jordan Hicks, I agree. The mean streak isn't there. The What I will say about the run defense, I'm not, I think another sort of narrative that may get pushed today is that, oh, the Vikings don't have an ability to stop the run. They're going to get run over all season, yada yada yada, and we'll see. If Austin Eckler has a big day next Sunday, and the trend continues and they keep giving up 100-yard rushers, then we can revisit that conversation. But the Bucs did not have success running against the Vikings, so 1 week isn't enough to really determine what they're going to be.
Agreed.
But the note that does need to be taken into account here is that 40 minutes on the field. That's a lot of time. Now 40 minutes was also, that it was aided by the fact that the Eagles continued to run the ball with success and just chew up clock. But not only was it 40 minutes, but there was quick frequency with which the Vikings had to go back out on defense. The first quarter was horrendous. It was about 2 minutes to 13 minutes in time of possession. It was just remarkable because the Eagles had a 5-minute scoring drive. The Vikings punted after a 2-minute drive. There was the Eagles punt, but then Powell fumbled. And then the Eagles had it again. And then the Vikings fumbled again shortly after the Hurts interception. They had the ball for all of 2 minutes that first quarter. And so the Vikings defense from the jump was out there for a long time. And
Right.
so that accumulation of time wears on you. And when you're trying to stop the run, especially, and you're just getting leaned on by 300-pound men for 40 minutes, the ability to stop the run diminishes. So we'll see. It's maybe a concern and a point to flag, and I'm sure Flores will have something to say about it in his preparation for San Diego.
Los Angeles.
But what's that?
I said Los Angeles.
They might as well be San Diego.
They might as well be the team with no home at this point. They should change their city every year and like don't build a stadium, just play in a college stadium every year for your
Play in a
home
high
games.
school
And
field for all we
it could be
care.
kind of. I'm trying to like market this. It could be kind of neat if they did it because like there would be a subsection of fans that like if they became the Cincinnati Chargers for a year or the Columbus Chargers. I would go to some games. I would go up there and I would be like a secondary Columbus Chargers fan just because like, oh my god, they're in my city right now. It would be like it'd be like Taylor Swift touring around the country, man. It would be really cool.
Anyway, what do you think that, we've talked about the mini buy and how players might, take a couple days off. That's generally what they do. They take the long weekend to be with their families, try and turn their football brain off for a couple days. But the coaches are going to be at TCO and they're going to be working. What are some main things that you think they should be focusing on for the next 8-9 days?
Yeah, I think that really quickly, let me just state I'm officially on the anti-Kwesi bandwagon. I wrote that down in my notes. It happened. It took 2 games in this season for me to happen, but I'm officially on the bandwagon, so we'll see.
Are the main points with that the lack of offensive line? We haven't even mentioned how bad the offensive line is, and I mean we just
it goes
quickly
without saying at this point.
Yeah, it's almost. I saw a colleague of mine at Vikings territory, Ali Siddiqui. He tweeted last night. He said it almost feels like the Vikings offensive line has been bad for 10 years. oh wait, it has been. Um, and that's true. The reality is it has been bad for 10 years.
Yeah.
Even when Adrian Peterson was around, I'm not even sure they had a good line. I think Adrian Peterson was just unbelievable.
Well, and if
Um,
people remember Adrian Peterson's home runs, if you remember Adrian playing, he would run the ball 28 times in a game, and
yep.
one of them would go for 75, and the rest of them would go for 2. And so it wasn't like we had
-3, and
yeah. Like it was very short gains, and then occasionally he would hit a home run or two in a game, and that was the offense basically.
exactly. But it just needs to be said, and then I'll let you carry on with your Quasi hatred. But Kirk Cousins was awesome last night.
Oh my god, he's
and
a badass.
like he was a dog, and it's not something that Kirk Cousins typically gets attributed with. He gets the Minnesota nice, he gets the sort of dad vibes and whatever, and people are like, oh, he's a nice guy, but he doesn't have the killer instinct. He had a killer instinct last night. It's just nobody on the team seemed to want to help him.
Yeah.
Justin Jefferson had a great game. He's continually unguardable. Darius Slay tried his darndest, but it was a mismatch. I think at one point in the game, Jefferson had been guarded by Addison or guarded by Slay on about 6 routes, and it was 6 receptions for 70 some yards. But anyway, despite the fact that Cousins had next to no time to throw, was getting hit almost every time he threw it, he was almost flawless. He was awesome. And a lot of it seemed to not matter because you were down by 20 at one point in the third quarter, and it felt sort of out of reach. But if he doesn't play that almost flawlessly, despite adverse circumstances, it ends 34-13 instead of 34-28.
Yep.
So anyway, just wanted to throw that in there because we just didn't even talk about it. But
yeah, we've seen Coke have games where, oh shoot, they kicked a field goal before halftime, we fumbled, they scored a touchdown, now we got to go back out there, pick, ball game, right?
Yep,
and
exactly.
and granted, look, we ended up, I think, punting after the pick, and then they ended up scoring a touchdown. Like, we were down 27-7, we were down 20 points, and we've seen Coke kind of phone it in and try to force some balls, and they get picked, and everyone says, oh my gosh, we lost this game because look, Cousins had 5 picks, and it's like, well, 4 of those were in garbage time while he was trying to throw us back into it. So I don't know if we really count those. But no, Coke was on his game last night. I think I said in my how do we win this game notes last week that Cousins was going to have to play the game of his life. And by God, he did it. And he tried with every ounce of his ability to get us over the hump. And at the end of the day, when you get rushed on for 250 and you don't have a line, that strip sack fumble, your wide receiver makes, I don't want to say a boneheaded play, but just makes a mistake.
A big mistake.
Let's just call it a mistake. And you just, he couldn't overcome it, and that's okay. I don't think anybody, Caleb Williams ain't overcoming that. Pat Mahomes ain't overcoming that. Pat Mahomes couldn't overcome Kadarius Toney dropping 6 balls on Thursday Night Football, and he lost to the Lions. People, I mean, are we blaming Pat Mahomes for that? Because I'm sure Mahomes. I'm about to go on a full rant, but I'm sure Mahomes could have placed his interception he threw against Detroit in a better location where Toney, it bounced off his hands and went up and a Lion pick-sixed it. But nobody's blaming Pat for that. Nah, it's all Cousins. It's all Cousins. I actually wrote down, and I wasn't going to say it, but I wrote down, turnovers, and then in parentheses, how do we blame Coke? Because I knew that was going to come up. But yeah, just no O-line. The defense is bad. You drafted Addison. He's not. He's getting used, but I just have some questions about Quasi, and I feel bad because there's a lot of people on the anti-Quasi bandwagon after last night, and I think it's you got to make the NFC Championship game this year, or else there's still going to be people at the end of the season calling for his head, and he's in a bad way. He's just in a bad way. It didn't help that Theo Jackson came in whenever Metellus went down. And Lewis Seen was just standing on the sidelines. And it's that's our first round pick, boys. Just chilling behind Theo Jackson on the depth chart. Anyway.
One quick thing I'll say about the Lewis Seen thing. And, I don't think he's played well enough to merit playing time. But I do think people need to remember that he broke his leg 11 months ago.
Yep.
That happened. And so, even the fact that he's still like playing football and he is on the active roster is actually kind of remarkable. Anyway, not saying that was a good draft pick. I'm not saying that admonishes Kwesi. It's more just trying to defend Lewis Cine a little bit for the fact that, he snapped his leg and then spent a month and a half in London because he couldn't fly home.
Yeah, no,
So-
I agree. I'm not. I think we agreed that our Lewis Cine bustometer was at a nice ambery color, and for me, I think it's well in the orange.
Yep.
But we'll see what happens. I mean, he's got a whole career to play. Mini buy talks. What can Kevin O'Connell, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, this front office, all the guys that wear suits and polos to the office, what can they do to take this 0-2 team who has an 88% chance of missing the playoffs now and turn them into Super Bowl contenders like a lot of fans were thinking they might just be? I want to pick
Including
my
you, by the
favorite.
way.
What? Yeah, including I'm. let me say this. I'm not coming off of it until if
You
they
can't.
lose. No, I will come off of it. I will gladly retract the take. I will say I'm wrong. I'm not saying I'm wrong yet because this team has been in every game.
It's too
man.
early.
It's way too early. We've been in games that we've shot ourselves in the foot. If we don't fumble at all against the Chargers, we might just beat them by 60. So I'm still well on the Vikings are going 12-5 and winning the Super Bowl train, but I'm going to go with this for my first mini-buy thing. Kevin O'Connell needs to think about adjusting his offensive game plan from being, like, trying to be what the 49ers are and be like a run-heavy attack and all this stuff. No, your center's out for a while. Oli Udo just went down. Darrisaw's dealing with an ankle. You need to play in the shotgun a lot. And you need to pivot this offense to 3 wide receivers, TJ Hawkinson and a running back. Maybe the running back's just there to block, and it's CJ Ham. And you need Addison on the field just as much as KJ, just as much as JJ. Because you need to. That's what the offense is going to have to be. It's going to have to be a passing offense, pass-first offense, and then you can use the pass to set up the run. And you're going to have to run kind of these surprising, shotgun, halfback up the middle, between the tackles, that kind of run. And so, again, I'm a Madden play caller. I'm not claiming to understand all of the ins and outs that go into, changing an offense midseason. I know it wouldn't be easy, but it needs to be done. Can't line up under center and keep doing play actions. He's going to die. He's going to die on the field. And that's the one that I have. That's my final one is Kirk Cousins. We need to tell him we love him every day before he goes out on the field, or before every game, because he's going to get hurt behind this O-line. He's not going to make it 17 games. And I worry about the guy. I think he's a great human being. I think he's been playing his hind end off the last couple of years for the Vikings. This season, he's off to a terrific start. And wouldn't it be fitting if the 1 year that Cousins looks dynamite for a month and a half, he gets injured because we didn't get him a line to play behind?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to speak anything into existence, knocking on all of the wood about that. Put the man in the shotgun. Let him throw the ball 45 times a game if it takes that. And let's get it cooking. So that's my tweak that I want to see made.
I like that. That's a good sort of change of pace that a lot of people probably aren't thinking about today. There's the questions, I'm sure, you go to Vikings Twitter, the things trending are probably Kwesi, dare I say Dalton Reisner,
KJ Osborne. People want
KJ
him
Osborne. Caleb Williams was trending last night. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, of course he is. I think the last thing I texted my brother was a gif of Caleb Williams throwing a touchdown pass.
And so, of course, the Caleb Williams discussion will come in 2 months' time if the Vikings are sitting at 3-8 and this whole thing's over. But we'll withhold our talk at this point.
Sure.
I like that idea. Something that Kirk is really good at, and Kirk Herbstreit on the broadcast last night, for one, really appreciates Kirk Cousins' game, which I thought was interesting. You don't often hear a broadcaster openly praise a quarterback of a team who's down by 2-3 scores, and also openly praise Kirk Cousins. It's just not that common. because he doesn't do anything that's like outwardly flashy and like overly impressive. It's just sort of this like, A plus game management sort of thing. And one of the things that Herb Street mentioned, and I think is very clear about Cousins, is one of his strengths is going through his progressions, making the right read, and making the right throw, and making an accurate throw. Um, so in some ways, taking that away from him by doing a lot of quick passes, a lot of shotgun, 3-step drop, 1-2 reads, get it out. You take away a weapon of his,
Yeah.
and so that's maybe a negative side effect of that, which is an interesting way to look at that. But I also think there's a lot to what you're saying, because you kind of have to get to the point. You kind of have to embrace the fact that you are a passing offense right now. It doesn't have to be that way in week 10. If your offensive line gets healthier and you figure your stuff out a little bit more. But I like that idea. Use the pass game as an extension of the run
Yep.
game, and be willing to throw, the Aaron Rodgers to Devontae Adams 1-step drop and a flick out to the right, and you take a 4-yard gain, and then you line
Yep.
up as if that was a first down run.
No, 100%. And you don't even have to like
So
bury Josh Oliver on the depth chart. I know that there's
absolutely
going to
not.
be like you sign Josh. You can line Hawkinson out wide and have Josh Oliver line up as a wide receiver. Now, whose spot should T.J. Hawkinson take in the wide receiver? Probably K.J. Osborne's. But that's just me throwing some KJ slander into the show because I'm still a little bit upset with him. But I just. Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah.
What do you? I have.
I like it.
I want to do like 2 or 3 of these a piece. But what do you have for the mini buy? What do they need to do?
I mean, for one, get healthy. That's a and it's weird to talk about that in week 2.
I agree.
Or I guess now going into week 3, but healthy really on the offensive front. And then I want to see Marcus Davenport play, man. I mean, that's just like, I think he's played 1 snap now in 2 weeks. I just, it's been a concern for him his whole career, being healthy, remaining healthy. And so I want to see what he's got. Danielle Hunter's been awesome.
Yeah.
But having, some of those dropbacks last night where Hurts, it was like rush 3, drop 8. Hunter just was relentless for like 7 seconds and then finally got the sack because the back end held up.
Yeah.
But I want to see Davenport get healthy. I want to see him play. Hopefully these 10 extra days now where there's limited time on the field, those guys, meaning Davenport, Darisaw, Bradbury, I think that's kind of the main issues health wise. That's one thing. It's very simplistic and it's very, not even X's and O's. I want these guys to figure out a way to do some ball security drills that actually work. And I joked on Twitter this morning that, we have coordinators for everything. In baseball, we got, base running coordinators. We got infield coordinators. We got, replay coordinators. And then in football, we got everything from pass game coordinators to run game coordinators to tackling coordinators to, of course, offensive, defensive, and special teams coordinators. The Vikings need to get a ball security coordinator. It's remarkable the amount of times this team has dropped the ball. Even last night when Madison fumbled for a second time, that was, after a defensive penalty, so it was a free play. But I mean, it's just wild how much this team has dropped the ball. And, O'Connell and I can't remember who exactly ran these meetings last year. I think it might have been Mike Pettin. But the situational master meetings on Fridays, I'm sure they still do them. But they need to start either paying attention more in those meetings or something, because the situational mastery is about an F right now.
Yeah.
So yes, I like your idea of the change of philosophy, not even change, the tweak of philosophy in the short term for the offense. I like your idea about, getting a little bit more mean on defense. Um, but this strange bugaboo of dropping the ball, um, you fix that, this season looks a lot different because honestly, this team has looked pretty decent for 2 games.
Yeah.
If you take away the 7 turnovers, and of course, that's a lot. You can't just take away 7 turnovers. But if you take away those 7 plays and you watch these 2 games, just like watch the film of them, didn't know what the score was, you'd think like, the Vikings are probably 2-0. So you fix the fumbling. Teach Kirk that, he has 2 seconds to throw the ball, and if he doesn't, just run up the middle and take a 1-yard gain and
Yep.
go to the next play.
If the ball's not out of your hands in like 3 seconds, you go like this and you cover it with your body and you fall down and we just go to the next play. I think that I have the perfect. First of all, I'm going to contact the Guinness Book of World Records. I think that's the most times I've ever heard coordinators used in a sentence.
You're probably right.
Which is an impressive feat. But the perfect coach for that would be Patches O'Houlihan from the Dodgeball movie. He could throw. Because that's what I wrote down. I wrote down make every player in the building. Linemen, quarterbacks, receivers, Daniil Hunter, they all have to carry a football that has been greased up. Put lotion on it, put, grease, whatever you want to do. 24 hours. And they have to do everything normally that they would usually do throughout the course of a day. That ball hits the ground, lynch, straight at him. I mean, like, you gotta do something, man. Cattle prod, I don't know what it is. Like, something has to happen to change it. I laughed when you said 7 turnovers. That is an obscene number. If they had 7 turnovers in week 7, I'd still be pissed off about it. I'd be like, man, that's like 1 a game. Like, we can't play 1 clean game. 7 in 2 weeks. Ridiculous amount of turnovers. Unacceptable. That was one of mine that I put a style next to. A couple of these I have a style next to. One I have a big style next to. I'll save that one for last. Probably my final thoughts. But, all right, let's see. I did the tell Coke you love him. Here's one. This one. Sometimes my dad creeps into this show a little bit unintentionally. This one's completely intentional. We should try, like, if the line can get to a point of health. Blake Brandel at guard.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Yep.
David Quessenberry at guard. Who knows? La'el Collins, who was released from the Bengals, who had a solid career with Dallas. Maybe you pick him up and you play him at guard. You got to get a guard. You have to do something about it. You can't if Ed Ingram, and I do not wish injury upon any player at any point ever, if Ed Ingram plays all 17 games for the Minnesota Vikings this season, I'm going to lose. I already look at all the hair that I lost from last week's video to this
fell
one.
Out.
It fell out last night, and I shaved my face because I was pissed. And so you can't let Ed Ingram play 17 games. I've already pointed out once in this show that Kirk Cousins won't make it through the season if that's the case. You got to do something. And I know that all those guys that I just listed are offensive tackles. That's because if we're going to go out and sign a guard, we all know who it is. And now the reports are there's zero interest from the Vikings. We know Reisner wants to come to Minnesota. Minnesota doesn't want Dalton Reisner. So I don't know what it is, but we got to do something about the interior offensive line and hope that our tackles can get healthy. By the way, I don't know if you saw the PFF grades. Brian O'Neill, one of the highest rated Vikings last night on the offensive side of the ball, had a really good game apparently. You didn't really notice because he's a tackle and all the pressure was coming from the blind side because Darrisaw was out. And maybe Philly did that on purpose. Oh, it was coming up the middle because
I think if you're an opposition of the Vikings at this point, you'd be silly to send your best pass rushers at Darrisaw and O'Neill. You might as well send them at Bradbury at the middle 3. There's no reason to put best on best because you can just exploit it.
Take advantage of the matchup.
Yeah, Darrisaw is going to win his matchup. O'Neill's going to win his matchup most of the time regardless. So you might as well put your worser players on them and go dominate the interior. It's sort of a simple math problem.
Yeah. I don't think I said this one either. I kind of listed, so I listed 3 guys there that we could try at guard. 2 of them are already on the team. We have to start trying out some different offensive line combinations
Yep.
because it ain't working. This one was actually the first one I wrote down, and I kind of left. It's low hanging fruit, and we already kind of talked about it. KJ Osborne needs to be the third string wide receiver.
Yep.
And if that means that you run more 3 wide receiver sets, then so be it. But if there's 2 wide receivers on the field, one of them needs to be named Jordan Addison, one of them needs to be named Justin Jefferson. I'm just telling it like it is. Addison is explosive. He looks really good. He looks like we have a superstar in the making to play behind Justin Jefferson. I'm all in on the give KJ Jordan Addison's spot, and right now it feels like to me that Addison is just like the deep threat, and that's all he's there for, and that shouldn't be what he's there for. When it was Diggs and Thielen, it was 2 guys that did the wide receiver position at an elite level, and it was electric, and it was awesome.
Yep.
And right now it feels like we have Justin Jefferson best in the league, KJ Osborne, I'm really upset with him, but I don't think anyone would consider him to be even like probably top 20 in the league. Top
Probably not.
30, maybe. Probably not even there. Like he's
No,
a wide
because that would make
3.
him a wide receiver 1 on some team, and that doesn't make sense.
And I don't think he's a wide receiver 1 anywhere. I think he's maybe a good wide receiver 2 in like Carolina, but not when you have Jordan Addison behind him, man. And not, and it's not like we're talking about trying to promote what's his name? Jalen Naylor. It's not like we're trying to promote Jalen Naylor. We drafted Addison in the first round, and he showed out in every game that he's played in. So that's just kind of my thoughts. I hate to do the KJ slander. I really do. I like KJ Osborne. He's a hell of a guy. He's a really good. I think he's a good wide receiver. He's a good football player. He's just not dynamic enough for what this offense needs, and this offense needs explosions and TNT going off and fireworks, and this offense needs to be special, and KJ just doesn't bring that to the table, in my opinion.
I think it looks a lot different, KJ Osborne's value to this team, if the offensive line could block anything, because I think his value would be a lot more in the run game, and it would look a lot different. I'm with you right now at this point, what this offense is sitting at and what they need. It's almost like we need to just throw the ball down the field. And so I agree with that. I think, what do we always say? Like you build a team from the center out, and if the Vikings had a competent offensive line group, I think everything else benefits from that, including our third best wide receiver, in a strange way, but. Right now, I agree. He's definitely not our second best guy right now.
People are saying tank for Caleb, and honestly, at this point, I'm saying tank for. There's a guy at Notre Dame who plays a hell of a offensive lineman, and I'm saying tank for him. And his name, no one's gonna. I'm not gonna know his name. I'm going to Notre Dame's game tomorrow, Saturday. If you watch this, later. So hopefully they beat the Central Michigan Chippewas, but
if they don't, that will be, maybe we should lead our show with that next week, because that would be embarrassing.
That would be the biggest loss I've ever seen in a sporting event. It wouldn't be. I've seen big upsets or whatever, but anyway, not a Notre Dame show. We should have addressed the offensive line. I mean, it's such a hindsight's 2020, I guess, but we had the hindsight in 2022 to.
Yeah.
We knew it. We knew it was a problem, and then we just ignored it, and we thought, well, they got to get better. They can't be that bad, and sure enough, they are. Do you have any other mini buy things, or do you want me to do?
Well, I was gonna say, is that your big star one, or have you not done your big star yet?
Haven't done my big star. I'm saving it for my final.
Well, thoughts. I'll just take my last final thought here, and then I'll let you close it out. I'm waiting for Pro Football Reference to update their stats from last night. They generally, with the advanced stats, they generally don't fill all that stuff in right away. So if I was looking for quarterback hits and pressures and all those things.
Yeah.
It hasn't been updated yet, because right now it's saying that Kirk Cousins only was pressured twice, and that is obviously not true. It says he was blitzed, hurried, and hit 0 times. All of those things are untrue. So I was going to drop some knowledge about our inability to just stop pressure, but we will, save that for next week. this is sort of just a fun thing. I'm not normally a hyperbole guy when it comes to, stats and on pace for things, especially when it's after 2 weeks. And I generally like to take the approach of calm down, relax. It's been 2 weeks where, even last year where it was like, oh my gosh, we beat the doors off the Packers in week 1. I wrote an article like the next day and I said, calm down. We were supposed to beat the Packers. Like, I'm generally not an overreaction artist, but I just want to say this. Justin Jefferson is on pace for 2,600 receiving yards this year. Now, it's 2 games. He's not going to probably get that. There's going to be a game in there where he gets 65 yards, and his numbers will calm down a little bit. But through 2 games, the Vikings have turned the ball over 7 times, 6 of which on offense, and they are still just destroying defenses with the Kirk to Jefferson combination. The defense knows it's coming. The defense plans for it. The Eagles put their best cornerback, one of the best in the league, on him, and it didn't matter. The Tampa Bay secondary is no joke, and it didn't matter. So, I was on the record earlier, I think, in this, off-season training camp saying I didn't want Jefferson to get 2,000 yards because I want it to be a more balanced attack. And, honestly, I still hold by that. I would prefer to have 3,000-yard receivers in Hawkinson, Addison, and Jefferson.
Yeah.
Rather than have Jefferson go for, 2,000. But don't put it past him. Because if 18's open, 8 is throwing him the ball. It's that simple. He's the most dynamic with it. He's the most dynamic before it, and he's the most dynamic after it. It's a very simple 1 + 1 = 3 situation. And if he is open, he is going to get the ball, and he's open a lot.
Can I point out that last night I feel like I saw too, if 18 is not open, 8's throwing him the ball. He's
happened.
He's giving him chances, and he should. He's the best receiver in football. I don't care what Tyreek Hill did in week 1. Jefferson is different, man.
Yeah. Well, there was that throw. It reminded my brother pointed it out. Danny Goodwin, shout out. He was on the Patriots pregame show last year. He pointed out last night that throw to Jefferson down by the right pylon in the 4th quarter between 3 defenders reminded him of the Adam Thielen touchdown reception against the Packers in Kirk's second game as a Viking.
Same. I had same wavelength with your brother because I was in the same exact boat. Well, he threw that ball and I was like, how did that not get intercepted?
By 2 or 3 different people.
Half the defense should have picked that ball off and somehow we caught it.
So I'll just end with that. Even if the Vikings finish this season with 7 wins and it's disappointing and they miss the playoffs and Kirk doesn't get re-signed and the whole team looks different next season and Kwesi gets fired and all these things, just appreciate watching 8 throw to 18 because it's the best combination in the league and I'm not sure there's a second. Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow could have an argument. But it's unbelievable. And these guys are on another level right now. And it's fun to watch. Enjoy it. It's not every year that you get, somebody this ridiculous on the outside catching footballs. So that's all I got.
So I'll do my big mini buy conversation. This really isn't a mini buy conversation. This is a conversation for later in the season, like around the trade deadline. You already know where I'm going with it. There's a good chance the Vikings are 2-6 at the trade deadline. There's a really good chance the Vikings are 2-6 at the trade deadline. If the Vikings are 2-6 at the trade deadline, I want to know what the Jets' record is at the trade deadline. And I want to talk to Coke about you're either riding Pine the rest of the way, not because of his play, not because of anything, but it is a tank job at that point. It is strictly a, look, buddy, we're 2-6. It's not happening. We are going to go in a different direction next year. You knew this. We didn't extend you. We added a void year just to make this year a little bit easier to move some money. We're going to pay you next year $28 million or whatever. we're going to look to trade you. Would you allow us to trade you, please? And you have to ask it nice. But I think there may be some interest there from the Jets if they're sitting at, let's say, 5-3 or 3-5. They're sitting there, they're a game or two below 500, and all of a sudden the conversation is, looks, if Zach Wilson doesn't look good, which I don't think he will, unfortunately, maybe the conversation is, look, if we can just get a quarterback in the building and we give him a week and then we stout him, and it's a veteran, and he's only got 1 year on his contract, so Rodgers could come back the next season and play, and there's no dead money for the Jets. It just it seems like the perfect storm to have the conversation. I don't want to trade Coke. I would rather win the Super Bowl with Coke, which I'm still on the 12-5. I say this a lot, and we never actually do it. This is one that I promise we are going to do. There's a pin going in this, and this will be brought back up later in the season, especially if the Vikings record is super low. Now, granted, we could be 6-2 at the deadline with wins over the Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers, and that pin will get taken out, and that message will get thrown, this take will get thrown in the trash. I'm just saying something to maybe keep your eye on.
Something to noodle on.
The more realistic trade, I think, is Danielle Hunter, who is also on a 1-year deal. I think he's someone that you could see the Vikings potentially move off of, trade him to, I'm trying to think of a contender that needs a pass rusher, and I can't off the top of my head.
Maybe the 49ers need him if Joey Bosa gets hurt.
The Niners,
there's worlds where those things matter. Or is
Ravens,
it Nick Bosa? Nick Bosa plays for the Niners.
Yeah.
Same
But
player,
also,
same guy.
But the Chargers, Joey Bosa, he could get hurt. There's so many teams that are going to be thinking this is their year, and they're going to want to replicate what Los Angeles did. That maybe you can pawn Danielle Hunter off for a 2nd-round pick, and then you can bundle the 1st and the 2nd, and you can move up into the top 5 and get a quarterback or whatever the case is. So the trade deadline could be really interesting. I would rather see the Vikings win the Super Bowl. That's my take. I'm still on at 12-5. Really quickly, you still got him at 12-5, or has your opinion changed drastically?
I'll stay for now. They're obviously going to have to turn it around next week. I do think that week 3 is a must win.
Yeah.
As early as this is about as early as a must win comes, but starting 0-3 is almost a death sentence. I still think 12 wins is possible. Looking at the schedule, there's a lot of winnable games still. And so I think this team is right there if they can clean things up. So, talk to me in a week and a half. If they're 0-3 and they look sluggish against the Los Angeles, formerly known as San Diego Chargers, then we can have a different discussion. But I'm not jumping off the 12-5 wagon yet.
I think I'm right there with. I know I'm right there with you. So this show has not lost hope. This show is not panicking. No one's head rolls. Everyone's head stays intact. The team lives. The Vikings will never die. Keep hope alive. Keep going to games. I think the Chargers game in Minnesota, right?
Correct. I think it's a
Be loud next weekend. We will talk about that game at some point next week. Follow Will on Twitter at WillBadLose. Follow the show on Twitter at LTB Vikings. Check out VikingsTerritory.com. Check out the Bad Loser blog. Shop Unified. And dang it, Minnesota, win a game. Skol, y'all.